The best way to minimize COVID-19 exposure to our firefighters is to do everything we safely can to try to catch fires before they go into extended attack and therefore need a large incident command post and all of the support services that go along with it. At NIC, we've been working closely with the geographic area coordination centers to aggressively pre-position resources like engines, hand crews, and helicopters from areas that are experiencing below normal fire occurrence, such as the Pacific Northwest and the Northern Rockies, into areas where fire season is in full swing, such as Southern California, the Southern Great Basin, and the Southwest. Some other steps that we've taken for the COVID-19 mitigation is we brought on additional aviation assets. This includes 11 of the surge air tankers to supplement our 13 exclusive use air tankers in both the large air tanker and very large air tanker categories. To mitigate COVID-19 exposure and promote social distancing, the NIC jet this year will only be carrying a total of 60 firefighters instead of the typical 100 like we would in a normal year. This was based upon a model conceived by the military when mobilizing troops on the same size and type of jet. One thing that I have noticed, and I attribute because of the current pandemic, is some reluctance in overhead resources, specifically to mobilize to incidents outside of a person's geographic area boundaries, in the way of unable to fill or UTF on some overhead orders that we typically wouldn't be UTFing nationally until much later in the fire season. Some successes have been seen in working remotely for both incidents and dispatch centers where folks can work remote if possible. The COVID-19 pandemic has created some challenges for the dispatch coordination system, and that could be from at the local level to the geographic area coordination center level, all the way up to NIC. Some of those issues are trying to mitigate exposure to our dispatchers and our coordinators. Some local area dispatch centers are working remotely, while some of the folks within the dispatch centers are working in the office. We're certainly seeing that in the geographic area coordination centers as well, with some success and some challenges. Here at the National Interagency Coordination Center, our staff is on a multitude of an A shift and a B shift, where the A shift works at the NIC and then the B shift works remotely from home. After a few days, the shifts will switch and there will not be any personal exposure between the two shifts. This has worked out significantly well for us so far through the fire season, and that is something that we are going to continue to promote. Now that we are a couple of months into the Western fire season, we have come up with some lessons learned for the best practices to keep our dispatch and coordination centers safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. While there have been some instances of COVID-19 in dispatch centers, utilizing social distancing and wearing masks when social distancing is not possible has proven effective in mitigating exposure to COVID-19.
Hello, my name is Ken Schmid. I'm the Deputy Operations Chief for Preparedness and Support for the Bureau of Land Management. I am also the BLM's representative to the National Multi-Agency Coordinating Group, better known as Nmac. Nmac is a group representing different agencies, including the U.S. Fire Administration, namely FEMA, the National Association of State Foresters, which represents state and local government, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the BLM, the U.S. Fish Wildlife Service, and the U.S. Forest Service. Our group is delegated responsibilities to provide overall operations management, priority setting, and resource allocation through multi-agency coordination at a national level. We set national preparedness levels, we prioritize geographic areas, and we assign national type resources, namely crews, aircraft, caterers as examples, and we work with military and international countries on mobilization. When COVID started impacting the U.S., our Nmac group met in early March, and we talked about the potential ramifications to firefighting. We got into discussions on how do we maintain our capabilities at all levels, even during a time where we as a nation must do our part to mitigate exposure to reduce the spread of coronavirus. We also discussed how are we going to plan for potential resource shortages by people not able to travel, and how can we reduce the risk to firefighters, but still accomplish our requirements to fight fires. On March 17th, we tasked the 3 National Area Command teams to coordinate with federal, state, county, and tribal health officials to help identify issues as they relate to COVID-19 and wildland fire response. We also asked them to develop wildland fire response plans for each geographic area, including protocols for potential exposure. We asked them to develop how incident management teams can mitigate exposure and to also coordinate responses with interagency partners and with state, local, and tribal groups responsible for wildland fire protection. The overall mission for this assignment was to ensure our nation has a standard approach to manage wildfires at all levels and on an interagency basis during this coronavirus pandemic. From this tasking, a wildland fire response plan was developed for each geographic area. The main body of this document was intended to provide best management practices for all levels of response. The appendices were intended for each geographic area to get into their own specific actions and practices. From these wildland fire response plans, many geographic areas develop team plans and their own localized plans. So depending on where firefighters travel, there may be local, county, community, state, or these geographic area plans. But that's all right. At least there are plans in place to help prevent exposure and also how to deal with potential exposure cases. States have different plans and are moving through different phases of COVID reopening. And again, that's okay. Resources should look at these plans, where they are going, and be prepared to take extra precautions to maintain social distancing. Nmac also generated a checklist to help ordering and sending unit, namely agency administrators, line officers, and duty officers, work through a process before ordering resources in or sending resources off. The key point with these checklists is there plans in place at the sending unit? Are resources coming in with three days supplies? And are there any special requirements or needs for incoming resources? I think the biggest point for those on the ground is that you need to be prepared to have your own supplies, including cleaning supplies, face covers, be self-sufficient for at least 3 days. Resources need to take extra precautions when traveling to incidents, including reducing exposure by limiting stops, not eating at restaurants, and again, bringing supplies for at least 3 days, potentially longer. During this pandemic, Nmac is meeting twice a week, and COVID mitigation remains one of our main discussion points. We will continue to work on standard mitigation measures with teams and firefighter resources, while continuing to try to move those resources where the greatest needs are. We need to be able to move resources around the country to successfully fight fire. Sharing resources and helping each other is one of our keys to our success. Firefighters and support personnel are essential emergency service providers and can move across state boundaries. The fire community as a whole is doing its best to make sure that when resources travel, they do so safely and minimize contact, including sometimes driving instead of flying and traveling with food to avoid going to restaurants as examples. From Nmac to all the resources fighting fire this summer, thank you for your efforts during this challenging time, and we ask that you continue to take the steps to mitigate risk from wildfires and also from this coronavirus pandemic. Thank you.